The dryer had 6 minutes left. I knew because I'd watched the timer more than the clothes. $41 in my wallet. I'd counted it twice already, same as I counted most things now. Rent I couldn't make, gas I couldn't buy. Days since I'd eaten something that wasn't from a gas station. 3 months behind on the apartment I no longer had. My van sat outside under the one working streetlight on South Georgia Street, with a crack running corner to corner across the windshield. And I'd been telling myself for 2 weeks I'd get it fixed once things turned around. I was the only one in the spin cycle, just me and the dryer and the smell of somebody else's fabric softener from a load 2 customers ago. A woman sat down across from me at the folding table. I hadn't heard the door. I hadn't heard a chair scrape. She was just there, plain gray coat, hair pulled back tight, no purse, no rings, nothing to look at twice. Before I could ask what she wanted, she set a laminated card on the table between us. 6 crossroads, marked in red ink, each one with a county road number written small beside it, and a mileage figure under that. Hale County, Cochran, Lynn, Yoakum, all of it inside 90 miles of where we were sitting. "Can I help you with something?" I said, because it seemed like the thing to say. She didn't answer that. She slid a typed sheet across the table next to the card, and on top of both of those she set a plain white envelope. "My name's Lillian," she said. No last name came after it. I waited for one anyway. I opened the envelope. Nobody told me to. 50s, held together with a rubber band, and I counted them once under the table, and then again because the first count didn't feel real. $700. "This is a lot of money to hand a stranger," I said. $8,000 a month," she said. "You'll drive the route on that card in your van. There'll be a bell in it before you reach the first crossing." "A bell?" "A handbell." "What's it do?" She stood up. "It calls," she said, and she walked out the front door without looking back at me, without looking at anything, like the door was just the next thing in a straight line she'd already drawn for herself. I sat there maybe 30 seconds. Then I got up and went out after her. South Georgia Street was empty both directions. No car pulling out, no figure walking off under the streetlights, nothing. Just the wind picking up trash against the curb and my own van sitting where I'd left it. I checked the door handle before I thought to check anything else. Locked. No scratches around the keyhole, no busted window, nothing broken. I got it open with my own key and there was a bell sitting on the passenger seat. Brass, about the size a schoolteacher might have swung to call recess, with a wooden handle worn smooth like somebody's grandfather had owned it 50 years before I ever touched it. I hadn't put it there. Nobody could have. The van had been locked the whole time I was inside doing laundry. I sat in the driver's seat with that bell in my lap and didn't start the engine for a long while. Eventually, I set it down on the floorboard, where I didn't have to look at it, and drove north to Trevor's place with the radio off. My cousin was already in bed by the time I let myself in, and I sat down at his kitchen table under the one light over the stove and spread the typed sheet out flat with both hands, the way you'd smooth a map. 7 rules, no letterhead, plain font like somebody had typed it on an old machine and never bothered dressing it up. Ring the bell exactly 3 times at each marked crossing. Do not ring it a 4th time under any circumstances. Leave the crossing before the 3rd ring fades. Never look back after the 3rd ring. Never ring the bell at any unmarked location. Ring it only at dusk or after, never in daylight. What comes is already on its way. The bell only tells it where to stop. I read that last one 4 times. Then I set the paper down flat again and just sat there with it, turning the whole thing over, the way you'd turn a coin looking for the mint mark. The lock that hadn't been forced. The single word she'd given me for an answer. Rules typed clean and precise, clause by clause, like somebody had thought hard about exactly how to say each one, and no more. The most sense I could make of it was some kind of survey. An acoustic study, maybe. Some eccentric outfit paying a driver to test sound carry across open country. The rules there to keep the company covered legal-wise if somebody got hurt doing something stupid at a rural crossroads after dark. It wasn't a good explanation. It was just the one that let me stop turning it over. $700 was real. I could feel the edges of it in my hand. I counted the money one more time before I let myself think about sleep. 50s fanned out under the stove light. I read through the final rule 4 separate times, trying to make it sit right. What comes is already on its way. The bell only tells it where to stop. Something about the phrasing sat wrong in my chest, the way a bad tooth sits wrong when you run your tongue over it. Not the words themselves, the order of them. Like whoever typed it had known exactly how much a person could take before they stopped reading and stopped right there. I laid the paper flat on the table. The stove light hummed above me, that thin, electric hum you stop noticing until the house goes quiet enough to hear it again. Trevor's dishes sat drying in the rack. Somewhere down the hall he was snoring, slow and even, a man with nothing on his mind heavier than his shift tomorrow. I sat there and turned the whole thing over. The van had been locked. I'd tried the door handle first, before anything else, and there were no scratches, no broken glass, nothing pried loose. There'd been a bell resting on the passenger seat, as if it had always been there and I simply hadn't noticed until now. Neither did the envelope. $700 doesn't get handed to a stranger in a laundromat over nothing, not by a woman who gives one name and no last name to go with it, who answers what's it do with a single word and then walks out the door like the door was just the next line in a sentence she'd already finished writing. "It calls," she'd said. I thought about that a long while, turning the phrase around, and I couldn't make it mean anything I wanted it to mean. You start looking for a place to set your fear down so you can pick up the money instead. I found one. Some outfit doing a sound study, maybe. Acoustic carry across open ground, something a university might pay for, or an oil company mapping how far a signal travels before it gets swallowed by all that flat nothing between here and New Mexico. Rules like these, precise and cold and covering every angle, that's not the language of something supernatural. That's the language of a lawyer. Ring it exactly 3 times so the data's consistent. Don't ring a 4th so you don't skew the readings. Leave before the 3rd ring fades. Don't look back. Because standing around in the dark at some county crossroads is how a driver gets himself robbed or run down, and nobody wants that on their insurance. Never ring it in daylight. Fine. Maybe the daylight readings don't matter to them. Never ring it anywhere unmarked. Fine. Keep the data clean. That last line I still couldn't make into anything reasonable. But 6 out of 7 isn't bad odds, and I've taken worse odds for less money than this. I picked the envelope back up and counted it. 14 50s, same as before, same rubber band holding them together loose enough that a couple slid when I fanned them. $700. $8,000 a month if I did this every week she wanted. I thought about the long crack splitting my windshield from one corner to the other. About 3 months of rent I didn't have anymore because there wasn't an apartment left to owe it on. About the gas station food, the smell of it still sort of in the back of my throat even hours later. $700 was heavier in my hand than any of that. I counted it again anyway. Habit. Same number both times. The typed sheet sat there under the stove light, its 7 lines squared up neat on the page. No smudges, no letterhead, nothing to tell me who'd written it or where. I folded it once and put it under the salt shaker so it wouldn't slide off the table in the night. Trevor's snoring caught and broke and started again. I got up and got my wallet out of my jacket, and I laid the $41 I'd walked in with next to the 1450s, and I counted the whole pile together, slow, once through with my thumb. $741. I said the number out loud, just to hear it in the quiet kitchen, low enough not to wake anybody. Then I squared the bills back into a stack, set the stack square on the table where I'd see it first thing, and turned off the light over the stove. I lay down on Trevor's couch in the dark, the cushions smelling like somebody else's dog, and I didn't decide anything I hadn't already decided by then. I was going to drive that route tomorrow evening. I was going to ring that bell at the first crossing on that card 3 times and leave before the third one faded, and I wasn't going to look back. I woke up on Trevor's couch with the folded sheet still under the salt shaker where I'd left it, and I didn't touch it again. I didn't need to. 7 lines don't take much holding on to. The day went by slow and then all at once. Trevor left for his shift a little after 7, and I sat around the apartment not doing much of anything, and then it was 4 o'clock, and I figured I'd better get moving if I wanted to hit that first crossing while there was still enough light to find it by. I took US 87 south out of Amarillo, then cut east on Farm Road 400 into Hale County. The land going flatter the farther I got, cotton fields stripped down to nothing this time of year, just rows of dead stalks running out to a horizon that never seemed to arrive. County Road 110 crossed County Road. 22 miles outside Plainview, right where the laminated card said it would be, a dirt road splitting a dead field in 2 directions that both looked the same. I got there at dusk. The sky still held a strip of pale orange low in the west, but overhead it was already going dark fast, the way it does out here when there's nothing tall enough to hold the light up. I parked on the gravel shoulder and killed the engine and just sat there a minute, listening. Nothing. No trucks on the farm road behind me, no dogs, no wind moving through what was left of the cotton. Just quiet enough that I could hear myself breathing. I got out. The gravel was loud under my boots, and I stood there a second feeling stupid for how loud I felt. The bell was heavier than it looked. I picked it up by the wooden handle, worn smooth in a groove where somebody's hand had held it 1,000 times before mine, and I rang it once. It went out across that field wrong. A bell that size should sound thin, should fade inside a few seconds the way sound does when there's nothing to bounce it back at you. This one didn't fade. It carried flat and clean all the way out to where the field met the dark, like the tone wasn't losing anything crossing that ground. I rang it a second time. Same thing. Same flat carry, same clean tone with no decay in it, out past where I could see anything at all. That was when something moved on the dirt road heading north. I couldn't tell you how far off it was. Distance doesn't mean much once the light's gone and there's nothing to measure it against. No fence post, no tree, nothing. But there was a shape out there, low and wide, and it was raising a little pale cloud of dust off the road as it came, and it was coming toward the crossing. I rang the bell a third time. I didn't watch to see what the shape did after that. I dropped back into the van in one motion, pulled the door shut, and had the key turned before I'd even settled into the seat right. I drove south on County Road 110 without looking in the mirror, both hands on the wheel. I kept it right at the speed limit the whole way, not a mile over. 40 minutes, maybe. I couldn't tell you exactly. I drove until the farm road put me back on US 87, and I stayed on 87 north a while, and then I pulled onto the shoulder and put it in park and just sat there with the engine still running. My hands were still on the wheel. I hadn't told them to let go. The bell sat on the floorboard of the passenger side, where I'd dropped it without thinking, brass catching what little dashboard light there was. The panhandle went flat and dark in every direction. No other cars on the road, no lights anywhere I could see, just the shoulder and the hum of the engine and me sitting there, with my hands still gripping 10 and 2. I didn't look in the mirror. I woke up on Trevor's couch with the smell of somebody else's dog still in the cushions and my hands aching a little, like I'd slept with them closed into fists. I lay there a minute before I got up. The apartment was quiet. Trevor's door was shut down the hall, and outside the window the sky was just turning gray with early light. I went out to the van in my socks. Locked, same as I'd left it. I checked the handle first, and it didn't give. I got my key out and let myself in, and there was a plain white envelope sitting on the passenger seat, same spot as the bell had been the first night. I didn't open it right away. I just looked at it a second, sitting there so ordinary in the morning light, like it hadn't come out of a locked vehicle nobody had touched. Then I opened it. 1450s. The rubber band was worn loose, and a couple of bills slipped free when I fanned them. $700. I sat there in the driver's seat with the door still open and counted it twice. Trevor had been asleep when I got in the night before. I remembered that much clear enough. The hall dark, his door shut, the apartment holding still around me while I sat at the kitchen table not sleeping. Nobody had come through that door after me. Nobody could have gotten to the van either. Not locked like that. Not without a key. I didn't tell him. I got dressed, went back out, and put the new envelope in the glove compartment on top of the first one. $1,400 folded together now. I shut the little door on it and drove to a diner on 6th Street. I hadn't eaten anything since the gas station food 2 days back, and my stomach had started saying something about it. I ordered eggs and coffee and sat in a booth by the window and didn't think about the shape on the dirt road for most of the meal. Then I did. I tried to put a word to it, the way you'd try to remember a dream that's already going thin on you, low, wide. It had been raising a low cloud of dust off the road, pale in what light there was, and it had been moving toward the crossing at a steady pace, not fast, not slow. That was all I had. I turned it over a few more times with my fork in my hand, and it didn't get any clearer. I ate the eggs. They were fine. I don't remember tasting much of anything. I paid at the register, $8 and change, and drove back to Trevor's with the window cracked so the cold air would keep me from drifting on the road, though I wasn't tired exactly. Just somewhere else in my head. I parked in the lot outside his building and sat there with the engine off. I took the laminated card out of my jacket pocket. It had gone a little warm from being against my chest all morning. 6 red circles on it, marked plain, county road numbers and mileage figures printed small beside each one. I'd already been to the first. County Road 110 and County Road A, out past Plainview. And I wasn't going back there again unless the route brought me back around to it. The second circle sat a little south and east of that, in Floyd County, down toward the Crosby County line. County Road 297 crossing Farm Road 41, a half-mile outside a little place called Estacado that I'd never had reason to drive through before any of this started. I looked at that circle a long while. 2 days, I figured. That's what I had before I needed to run it. I thought about the flat carry of that bell out across the dead cotton, how the sound hadn't faded the way sound's supposed to fade. I thought about the shape on the road, and how I hadn't looked back after the third ring, how the rule had told me not to, and I hadn't needed much convincing. $1,400 sat in the glove compartment 3 feet from my hand. I sat there in the parked van outside Trevor's building with the card still in my hand, looking at that second red circle, and I already knew I was going to go. Roper's sat on the edge of Floydada with a gravel lot half empty and a sign out front missing its R, so it read OPEs from the highway. I pulled in with maybe 40 minutes of light left and figured that was enough. I wasn't in a hurry to get to the crossing. I just didn't want to be driving up on it blind. Headlights the only thing telling me where the road ended and the field began. Inside it smelled like grease and coffee that had been on the burner too long. I took a stool at the counter and ordered eggs, and the waitress didn't write it down, just called it back through the window like she'd heard it 1,000 times before. I was maybe 2 bites in when an old man sat down on the stool next to me. He didn't ask if it was taken. He just sat, like the stool had been waiting on him specifically. "Coffee," he told the waitress, and then to me like we'd already been talking a while. "Cold enough to make you feel it in your knees today." I said something back. I don't remember what. It didn't much matter to him either way. "Name's Martin," he said, though I hadn't asked. "My grandson's got a place out past here, toward Estacado. Good cotton ground. 3 generations on it now, if you count him. I nodded and ate. Stephen, he said, that's the grandson. Good boy. Works that ground harder than his daddy ever did, and his daddy worked it plenty. He was already pulling his phone out of his shirt pocket before I'd said anything back. He held it up sideways so I could see it, thumb pressed to the screen like he'd shown this photo enough times that his hand knew the way there without looking. A white farmhouse, red barn set back behind it, a live oak with a tire swing hanging still in whatever wind there'd been when the photo got taken, and 2 kids somewhere in the yard, small and blurred at that distance. That's the place, Martin said. Good land. My hand went to my jacket pocket without me telling it to. I didn't take the card out. I didn't need to. I already knew what was on it, and I knew the second red circle sat a half-mile off a farmhouse that looked exactly like the one on that little screen. I said it looked like a nice place. It is, he said, and put the phone away and kept talking. He talked about the youngest for most of 10 minutes. Dawn, he said her name was, and he said it soft. She had her great-grandmother's eyes, he told me. Same shape, same color. And he said it twice in 2 different ways. He said she ran everywhere instead of walking. He said she liked to get down by the fence line and look for rocks. I ate my eggs. I said the things you say. That's sweet. Sounds like a good kid. I didn't look at the card. I didn't need to look at it to know where it pointed. The waitress came by and refilled his coffee without him asking. You passing through? Martin said. Or you got people out this way? Passing through, I said. He nodded like that answered something for him and went back to talking, this time about the cotton, how the ground out there had always run good, how Stephen's daddy used to say a man could tell good dirt just by the smell of it before a rain. When I got the check, I paid for both of ours before he could reach for his wallet. He looked over at me a little surprised, like nobody'd done that for him in a while, and started to say something about it, but I was already sliding off the stool. Appreciate that, he said. You're all right. I told him to take care and went out to the van. The light outside had gone flat and gray, casting no shadows, and I sat behind the wheel a minute before I turned the key. I thought about the tire swing hanging still on that live oak. I thought about a girl running down toward a fence line looking for rocks, with her great-grandmother's eyes, 6 years old, and a grandfather who talked about her like nothing else in the world mattered. I could still turn around. Nobody was making me point that bell anywhere in particular. The card just marked crossroads. I was the one who had to be standing at them when dusk came down. I put it in drive anyway. US 84 ran me back out of Florida, and I picked up FM 41 heading south, the fields going dark on both sides faster than I liked. No fence posts left to measure the dark against. No lights anywhere ahead of me yet. Estacado was still out there somewhere past what my headlights could reach. The farmhouse was still not visible, the laminated card sitting square in my jacket pocket the whole way. The crossing sat quiet when I got there. Just gravel and dark, and a half-mile east of it, a white shape with one window still lit yellow against all that black. I didn't get out. I stopped the van and just sat there looking at that window. I took my phone out and pulled up the picture I'd taken of the typed sheet before Trevor's salt shaker ever got near it. Rule 7. What comes is already on its way. The bell only tells it where to stop. I read it twice and put the phone face down on the seat. 40 minutes I sat there. I know because I watched the clock more than I watched anything else. The same way I'd watched the dryer that first night in the laundromat. The shape outside Plainview came back to me too, wide and low to the ground, kicking up a little cloud of dust as it moved, and I still couldn't tell you what it was, not the shape of its head or the length of its legs or anything else a person could hold on to, just that it had been coming toward the crossing when I rang the third time, and I hadn't looked back to see what it did once I dropped into the van. I thought about the girl running down to the fence line looking for rocks, Her great-grandmother's eyes, Martin had said twice. I picked up the bell and got out of the van. The gravel crunched loud under my boots, same as it always was, and I felt exposed standing there in the open. I rang the bell once. It went out flat and clean across that field, same as it had before, no fade to it, carrying straight toward that lit window like there was nothing in between to slow it down. I rang it a second time. I raised my arm for the third ring and stopped. Arm up. Bell still. I don't know how long I stood there like that. 3 seconds. 4. The whole night gone dead quiet around me. No wind, no bugs, nothing. I thought about that window. I thought about Dawn, 6 years old, running instead of walking, and I thought about how nobody had told me what happened if you left it at 2. I finished the third ring. I couldn't tell you why. It just felt worse to stop there than to go on, and I didn't have time to work out the why of it standing in the open like that. I was moving before the tone died all the way out. Bell in one hand, van door already open, and I was behind the wheel and turning the key with the sound still hanging somewhere behind me in the dark. I pulled onto FM 41, heading west. I looked in the side mirror once. It was standing at the crossing. 8 feet, maybe 9. Too tall for anything that stands on 2 legs the way a person does, and it wasn't moving. It didn't turn toward me. Its head was turned east, toward the farmhouse, toward that one lit window a half-mile off, and it stood there like it had all the time in the world to keep looking at it. And I put my eyes back on the road and didn't look again. I drove west on FM 41, and then I picked up US 84 heading north, and I did not stop. Not for gas, not for the bathroom, not for anything. 3 hours of dark highway with the radio off and my hands locked at 10 and 2 the whole way, same as the first night. Amarillo came up gray at the edges before it came up as anything else. I parked in front of Trevor's building with the engine still running and sat there a long while before I turned the key. I didn't go in right away. I sat in that parking lot until 4 in the morning, watching nothing, the bell down on the floorboard where I'd dropped it. Then I went inside and lay down on the couch and didn't close my eyes. The window across the room went from black to a kind of dead gray, slow, the way the sky looks just before dawn. I lay there and watched it happen and didn't sleep through any of it. The shape at the crossing still standing there behind my eyes, head turned east, facing that farmhouse, patient as anything I'd ever seen. I didn't sleep. The gray at the window turned white, and around 7 I got up off Trevor's couch and told myself I was going to go check the road conditions south of Florida. That wasn't a thing I'd ever needed to do before. Roads out here don't change much. I got in the van anyway and drove. US 84 ran quiet that early, just a truck or two hauling something out of Lubbock, and I came through Floydada without stopping and turned east toward Estacado same as the night before. Except the light was doing something different to the fields now, flat and gold instead of nothing at all. I slowed, coming up on the farmhouse. It was standing. The barn was standing, red paint faded but whole, no scorch on it, no mark I could see from the road. A man was out in the yard doing something with a hose bib, and I took him for Stephen, and a woman in a green jacket stood near the porch steps with a coffee cup, and one of the kids was running a loop between the barn and the house the way kids do when there's nowhere in particular they need to be. I let a breath out I hadn't known I was holding since the night before. Then I saw the stones. Along the fence line where the yard grass met FM 41, somebody had laid a row of small flat stones, evenly spaced, running the whole length of the property from the corner post to the gate, straight as a chalk line. They hadn't been there when I'd driven past the first time, and I was certain of it. I stopped the van on the shoulder and just looked at them a while. The woman in the green jacket saw me stopped and lifted her hand and waved, easy, the way you wave at anybody who slows down on a farm road, and there was nothing in her face that said she saw what was laid 6 feet behind her at the edge of her own yard. I waved back. Then I drove on, because there wasn't anything else to do with my hand once it was up. I didn't stop again until I hit the north side of Floydada, where I pulled into the gravel lot of a feed store that wasn't open yet, put it in park, and sat there with both hands on the wheel. It hadn't gone into the yard. It hadn't touched the barn or the house or the kid running loops between them. It had stood at the edge of what it wanted and laid something down to say so. A boundary. Something had walked the line of that property in the night and marked where it stopped, and the people sleeping inside that house would step over those stones 100 times today, feeding chickens or hauling water, and never once look down. I sat with that until my hands stopped feeling tight on the wheel, and then I drove back to Amarillo. I got in around midday and slept most of the afternoon on Trevor's couch without meaning to. It came down on me heavy, not something I chose. When I came up out of it, the apartment was dark and Trevor's door was shut again, and everything was quiet the way it had been the first night, before any of this. I went out to the van the next morning in my socks, same as before. Locked. I let myself in, and there was a new card on the passenger seat. Same lamination, same red ink, 4 crossroads this time instead of 6, spread wider now. One of them sitting on the west edge of Lubbock off the Slayton Highway. Under the card was a folded slip of paper I hadn't put there. Handwriting. Plain, unhurried, no slant to it, letters set down like somebody who never had to write fast in her life. I hadn't seen her hand before, but I knew whose it was before I'd finished the first word. You did well. The 4th ring would have called it back, and it would have looked for you instead. I read it twice. I sat there with the card in one hand and the note in the other and worked it through, the way I'd work through a bill I couldn't quite make add up. The rules weren't there to keep some study clean. 3 rings and leave, don't look back, never a 4th. That wasn't procedure. That was the difference between it looking at a farmhouse and it looking at me. Not showing up at all. I turned that over too. If a 4th ring called it back, what would a missed crossing do? I didn't have an answer for that one, not a clean one, but I didn't need the note to spell it out. I thought about asking her straight, if I ever got the chance. A phone number, something. She'd never given me one. No last name, no address, nothing but a laminated card that showed up on a locked seat like the van wasn't locked at all whenever it wanted to be something else. I sat there in front of Trevor's building with the new card in one hand and her note in the other, engine off, morning cold coming in through the cracked window, and understood that none of this had ever been a job. It had been the terms I was living under. I folded the note and put it in my jacket pocket with the card, and I sat there another minute before I started the van. I told myself I was going to Coulter Street for gas. That was true enough. But it wasn't the reason I turned the key. I was going to keep driving that route because stopping felt like a 4th ring. Nobody had told me that. It was just there in my chest, the same way the money was there in the glove compartment. I filled the tank, $31 and change. The kid at the register didn't look at me twice, and I lingered by the pump a moment longer than I needed to, just being somewhere ordinary, before I got back in and drove. The next 2 weeks went by in a way that didn't feel like 2 weeks. County Road 5 crossing FM 179 outside Edaloo, then 2 weeks later FM 2458 crossing County Road 270 outside Lorenzo, and both times I did it clean. 3 rings. Moving before the 3rd one finished dying out. Eyes on the road ahead of me and nowhere else. I didn't look back either time. That was the rule, and I kept it. And both mornings after there was $700 sitting on the passenger seat of a van, I'd locked myself, same as always. No explanation offered or asked for. I stopped trying to make sense of the money. It came. I counted it. I put it with the rest. The 5th crossing on the new card sat on the edge of a town called Whiteface, out past the grain elevator that must have run something once and didn't anymore. Half the storefronts on the main street had paper over the windows. The other half just sat dark, no paper, no glass, even in a couple of them, like whoever left hadn't bothered locking up behind themselves. I got there at dusk, same as always. Gravel intersection, nothing marking it but the card in my pocket and the mileage number that matched. I parked, got out, picked the bell up off the seat. Rang it once, flat and clean, same as it always went, out across ground that had nothing on it to stop the sound. Rang it twice. Rang it a third time and got back in the van before the tone had finished. Same motion I'd made 4 times now, door shut, key turned, foot on the gas before I'd even settled square in the seat. I looked in the mirror. I don't know why. 4 crossings I hadn't. This one I did, and it was already too late to take it back once my eyes were there. It was closer than it had been outside Estacado. Close enough that I could see there wasn't a face on it. Just a flat place where a face should have sat. Smooth, nothing on it. Turned square at me like it had been waiting for me to look. It was holding something. Small. Catching what was left of the light in the west. And I knew what it was. A bell. Brass. A wooden handle turned the same shape as mine. Worn the same way, like somebody's hand had been on it just as long. It raised the bell and rang it once. I heard it. Through the glass, across however many yards there were between us, and I felt it before I heard it, a pressure landing flat in my sternum like something had pressed a thumb there. My phone buzzed on the seat. I didn't look at it right away. I couldn't. Not yet. Both hands locked on the wheel and my foot already down harder than the limit wanted. When I did look, one hand off the wheel just long enough, it was a text from a number with no name on it. 1 of 3, that was all it said. I turned the phone face down on the seat and kept my eyes on US 385 running east out of Whiteface, 10 over the limit and not slowing down for it, and I didn't look in the mirror again. The pressure stayed in my chest the whole way, sitting there like the bell was still ringing somewhere behind my ribs, and the dark came down flat and even on both sides of the road. The Flying J sat lit up bright at the edge of Lubbock, off the East Slayton Highway where it met the loop, a big square building glowing white against everything dark around it. I pulled in and parked crooked and didn't care. I needed people. Not a farmhouse window a half-mile off, not a shape at a crossroads with a bell in its hand. Actual people, sitting around under fluorescent light, buying jerky and coffee and not thinking about any of it. Inside, the counter ran the length of one wall and most of the stools were taken. Truckers mostly. A couple of families still up too late. A girl behind the register scanning something through with a beep that sounded almost normal. I sat down and ordered coffee and didn't say anything else. And when it came, I wrapped both hands around the mug and just held it. My phone still lay screen down on the seat of the van. I hadn't touched it since Whiteface. 1 of 3, it had said, and I wasn't ready to look at that again yet. A few minutes in, I noticed the man 2 stools down. Broad through the shoulders, 50s maybe, a canvas jacket worn soft at the elbows. He drank his coffee slow, both hands around it the same way I was holding mine, and sticking up out of his shirt pocket, just the corner of it catching the light, was a laminated card. Same lamination, same red ink. I looked at it longer than I should have. He caught me looking. "How long you been doing it?" I said. He didn't answer right away. He set the mug down and looked at me a good few seconds, like he was deciding something about my face before he decided anything about the question. 8 months, he said. Name's Ryan. Atticus. How'd you find out about it? He said. Woman named Lillian found me. He nodded slow, like that confirmed something he'd already half known. A woman named Lillian found me too, he said. Bus station in Clovis, New Mexico. Haven't heard from her since the first day. We looked at each other a while after that. Neither of us said anything. I took my card out of my jacket and set it on the counter between us. Ryan reached into his shirt pocket and set his down next to it. Mine ran through the panhandle. Red circles scattered across Hale and Floyd and Lynn and Yoakum. His ran west and south out of Clovis, down through country I'd never driven, toward Roswell. We laid them side by side and looked at the two of them together. It wasn't a shape I would have called anything on its own, but side by side, the circles lined up. Not close together, not random, spaced even, the same distance apart no matter which direction you counted, like somebody had drawn lines I couldn't see and dropped a circle wherever two of them crossed. A grid. Not a star, not a symbol, just squares laid across two states, filled in a few at a time, on schedule. "There's a third," Ryan said. "Man at a rest stop on I-40, near Santa Rosa. Told me somebody's working south of Midland, West Texas side." I didn't say anything to that. I was still looking at the cards. We started counting. Squares the pattern implied, but neither card had marked yet. Gaps sitting right where the spacing said something should be. I lost count once and started over. Ryan didn't say anything while I did it, just watched my finger move across the laminate. 11. I did the math without wanting to. 2 cards a month between the two of us, maybe 3 with the man near Midland, and 11 squares left open across that whole grid. "Under a year," I said. Ryan picked his card up off the counter and folded it back into his shirt pocket, careful, like it belonged there and always had. "I don't know what happens when the last square gets filled," he said. "Nobody told me." "I don't either." We sat with that a while. My coffee had gone lukewarm in my hands. Neither of us said anything else. Then Ryan reached for his wallet and left a few bills on the counter and stood up. "Take care," he said. And that was it. No handshake. He walked out through the glass doors into the lot, and I watched him get into a truck 2 rows over and pull out onto the highway without looking back at the building once. I sat there alone with my card still flat on the counter, the space where his had been just empty laminate top now, nothing on it but coffee rings. 11 squares, spread out across the high plains of 2 states, waiting on somebody to drive out to them and stand at dusk and ring a bell 3 times. My phone sat face down on the counter next to my coffee, screen dark. I turned the phone back over. 1 of 3. Sent 47 minutes ago, according to the little gray line under it. I read it again like it might say something different the second time. It didn't. Same 3 words, same period at the end, same nothing else after it. At Whiteface, it had rung its bell once. That was 1. 2 more coming, and I didn't know when, and I didn't know where. I thought about Lillian's note, folded flat in my jacket pocket next to the card. The note said a 4th ring would call it back, and then it would come looking for you instead. So the rules cut both ways. If a 4th ring pulled something back toward whoever rang it, then maybe 3 rings finished what the bell started, the same way 3 rings might close out a crossing. Completed it. I didn't know what completed meant on that side of it. I didn't want to. There wasn't anybody to ask. No number for Lillian, no address. Nothing but a woman who showed up once in a laundromat and never again, and a locked van that let itself get opened whenever she felt like it. The 6th crossing sat on the new card, unmarked, waiting on me same as it had for 2 weeks. I thought about not going. I turned that over slow, the coffee gone cold in front of me. Not showing up wasn't in the rules, but the closest thing I had to compare it to was still a 4th ring, an action left half done. I didn't know if that was better than ringing it. I didn't know if it was worse. I put the card back in my jacket. I paid for the coffee with a few bills more than it was worth and didn't stick around for change. The van sat crooked where I'd parked it, the Flying J's lights washing white across the hood. I got in. The bell was on the passenger seat, same as always, brass catching the lot lights through the windshield. I looked at it a while before I did anything else. Then I started the engine, US 87 ran north out of Lubbock empty this late, just the yellow line unspooling in the headlights and dark on both sides of it. No fences I could see, no lights except every once in a while a porch bulb burning way off from the road. I kept it at the limit. I didn't know why that mattered anymore, but it did. The Bell rode beside me the whole way, not sliding, not moving, just sitting there in the shape it always sat in. 11 squares. Ryan's cousin near Midland working his corner of it, me working mine, him working his, and something out there with its own bell working through its own count, same as we were working through ours. The 6th crossing stayed unmarked. I kept driving anyway. Amarillo was still 3 hours off, and I didn't have a plan past getting there. Trevor's building came up dark on the north side, one porch light burning over the entrance and nothing else. I pulled up in front of it and shifted into park, letting the engine idle the way I had that first night, sitting there before I let myself move. 2 hours since Lubbock. My hands still had the wheel shape pressed into them. I looked over at the passenger seat. The Bell was gone. I sat with that a second. I looked at the floorboard. I looked under the seat, leaning across, one hand braced on the dash. Nothing. Just the seat itself, and on it, sitting square in the middle like it had been set there on purpose, a stone. Small, flat, about the size of my palm. I didn't touch it right away. The van doors had been locked the whole drive, same as every night this had happened. Nobody could have gotten in. Nobody could have gotten out with a brass bell and left a rock behind instead. Not on a highway doing 65 with me sitting 3 feet from the seat the whole time. I picked it up. It was cold. October cold outside, cold enough for my breath to show, but that wasn't the kind of cold this was. This came up through my palm and sat there, and it didn't warm any the longer I held it. I turned it over, smooth on both faces. No markings, no color to it beyond plain gray stone, the kind you'd find in any dry creek bed in this part of the state and never look at twice. I'd seen this exact stone before. A whole row of them, laid straight as a chalk line along a fence where a farmhouse yard met FM 41, a boundary nobody inside that house had ever once looked down to notice. I knew what it was before I finished turning it over the second time. It had marked the edge of what it wouldn't cross at the farmhouse. Now it had marked this. The bell was gone because I didn't need it anymore. It wasn't mine to carry between crossings. It had only ever been the thing that told something where to stop, and something had decided it already knew. I set the stone back down on the seat, careful, the way you'd set something down that might tip if you didn't mean it. I turned the key. The engine went quiet and the parking lot came up around me, dark, the porch light the only thing burning. My phone was still on the seat where I'd left it face down since Whiteface. I turned it over. 1 of 3. Same 3 words. No second message under it. I didn't know when the next one would come, or what the third ring finished once it was rung, and I didn't know it standing there any better than I'd known it 2 hours back on the highway. The card was still in my jacket pocket, folded soft at the crease now. The 6th crossing was still blank on the card, the same as it had been since Lubbock, and would become morning. 11 squares left open across 2 states, something out there working its own corner of that grid the way I was working mine, and it knew exactly where I stopped for the night, close enough to leave something on the seat of a locked van to prove it. I got out. I locked the door behind me, out of habit more than anything, the key turning over a lock that had never once kept anything out that wanted in. I didn't look back at the van. I didn't look down the street either direction, not toward the highway, not toward the dark end of the block where the streetlights gave out. I went up the walk and through the door into the stairwell, the porch light falling away behind me, and I climbed the stairs to Trevor's floor without stopping, my hand cold in a way the building's warmth didn't touch. Behind me, out past the lot, the van sat where I'd left it, locked, dark, a flat gray stone resting on the passenger seat where a bell used to be.